Hi, welcome to A Course in Miracles workbook class, brought to you from the Little Garden in Sedona, Arizona, USA. Okay.
Good morning, Jan.
Hi,
What
sweetie.
are we doing today?
Today is lesson 160 in A Course in Miracles. I am at home. Fear is the stranger here. So this whole lesson is an extended metaphor, trying to get us to recognize that we belong. As Suzanne said before we got started, our home is in God. Our home is in God. And if we are thinking with fearful thoughts, if we're identifying with the body, that is fearful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the body is soft. When I was a kid, I used to look at my veins here, the blue things, and I go like, ooh, I'm so vulnerable. I could just die so easily. Well, we have different fears as we grow up, but fear, no matter what it's about, fear does not belong in heaven. And that's the point of this one.
Do you remember when we studied with Robert Perry?
Yeah.
So when he mentioned about this metaphor of being at home, right?
Uh-huh.
So when you're at home,
Mm-hmm.
you're at a place of safety.
Yeah.
You're at a place where you're relaxed.
Right.
You don't feel like like you're standing before the royalty or something. You just feel relaxed.
Yeah.
You feel safe.
Right.
You feel quiet. You put your feet up on the coffee table, and that's what he's trying to produce inside of us.
Yeah.
A sense of this familiarity with self, that I'm safe.
Right. Yeah. And familiarity with God and all our brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that sense of home.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. As I mentioned to you earlier, this lesson used to really bug me because of the word stranger. It's like, aren't we supposed to love strangers and welcome them? Yes, and this is being used in a specific way, meaning it doesn't belong. It's like sand in your food. It does not. Fear does not belong in our minds. So some of the ways I've thought about it is fear is a parasite. Fear is what is in my mind. When it's in my mind, when I'm entertaining fearful thoughts, fear is sucking out my life energy.
Mm-hmm. So remember that beginning of chapter 12, where he's talking about the way the Holy Spirit deals with fear.
Yeah.
It's saying if you just get in touch with your emotions, which we're supposed to do, become aware of what you're feeling. But if you do that,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't let the Holy Spirit reinterpret fear, see, fear is a denial of love. So the Holy Spirit takes fear and uses it not to deny love, but uses fear as a call for love.
Right.
That you see the Holy Spirit answer.
Right.
So this negative emotion that's making us feel displaced, like we're strangers,
Mm-hmm.
this negative emotion can be the means
Mm-hmm.
for going back to God. So rather than fear putting us in conflict, fear, if we let the Holy Spirit reinterpret the meaning of it, then fear can be a way where we come back for love. And that's where he's saying love is appreciation of others, because no matter what they're doing, it's either they're being loving or they're calling for love, which you can answer.
Right.
So fear's not a problem anymore. Fear's not making the split in the mind real anymore.
Sometimes when other people are angry or upset in some way, it will trigger fear in me. In other words, I'll go into a sympathetic vibration with them, and I will be in fear. And so what you're saying here is when that happens, look at how any form of negative emotion is fear.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're angry, they're calling for love.
Yeah.
And if I take my fear or my desire to fight back or whatever form of fear I'm anticipating, experiencing rather,
right.
if I take it to the Holy Spirit and say, I don't like this, please help me, then what happens is I go farther along the path than I was before that event happened.
Well, yeah.
So
it's an opportunity. Rather than here's one more problem, it's an opportunity.
Yeah. There's a place where it says that guilt, the only purpose of guilt is to show you that you were thinking wrong.
Yeah.
Same with fear.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a metaphor I've used before, but I happen to like it. We're driving along and maybe it's in the dark. Maybe we don't see what's going on and we hit a tree. Well, that tree is like hitting guilt or hitting fear or hitting anger. Mm-hmm. And it's like, all it's saying is back up and start over again. This is not a fatal accident. This is just a little bump on the road, no biggie.
Yeah.
But hitting the tree showed you that you were off the path. You were off the road.
Yeah. So that's very cool, because what he's saying is this stuff is, these emotions like fear are going on without your awareness, right? But once you become aware of it, you're going to do what he says in this lesson at the end of paragraph 2. And yet, how easy would it be to say, I'm home here. Here I belong. I'm not going to leave this because this fear is telling me I don't belong in love.
Right.
Well, why would I let fear do that to me? Nothing doing.
Nothing doing. So that's the main deal, is to recognize that just because a madman, which is our ego, says, you have got to feel bad about that. You have got to feel hurt, frightened, whatever. Just because our ego says that, we don't have to listen to it. The ego will always show us proof of why we should feel fearful, worried, upset. I mean, first thing I did this morning after doing my lesson was I opened up my computer and it showed me some headlines. And the first one was basically what we should be worried about now. It's like, oh, right. Am I going to entertain what I should be worried about? What is that? That's inviting fear to come into my mind. If I have the awareness that whenever I'm upset, the Holy Spirit has an answer. So this particular thing was about the flu is coming. Oh, I better be really worried about that one. If the flu starts to, show itself in the population, I take that to the Holy Spirit. I don't have to prepare by worrying. Now, really think about it. And I'm not criticizing how people think, because this is the world we are here to save. The world that is based on the belief that fear has value.
Right. So when we give this emotion, fear, to the Holy Spirit, and he shows us clearly, this is just denying love, and love is who you are. Right. So rather than meeting their fear with fear, we meet it with the Holy Spirit's water that puts out the fear.
Fear and fire.
I mean, the Holy Spirit's like water that extinguishes that hot wire of fear and, oh God, what's going to happen?
Right.
It brings us back to peace. Fear can bring us back to peace, to a sense of I belong, my sense of worth, rather than being an obstacle to what we're meant to learn.
So what you're pointing out is one of the Course's big themes is that we have to look at the darkness. We have to look at our pain, our emotional pain, at the beliefs that are painful. We have to look at them, and be clear about it. It's my pain. If I'm seeing pain out there in someone else and I think it's not in me, wrong. It's my pain that I'm seeing projected out there, and I am feeling pain. See that darkness and give it over as not true. not of God, not real.
Right.
This is not the way to progress on the path of love, to entertain that upset. So we have to look at it.
Yeah. So would this be an example? Because this seems to be kind of a typical interpersonal dynamic, say a couple or somebody who's a partner with somebody, they're doing something together and something goes wrong. And we're trying, no, it's because you did that. That's why we got, no, it's because you did that we got here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going back and forth, like, who's to blame? We got to figure out who's to blame.
Right.
And what the Course is saying is get rid of the blame thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
You're both holy children of God.
Right.
Make the resolution of that situation be your acceptance of this call for love that's answered for you.
Yes.
And then the peace that you experience from that will let you know, here's how I'm going to relate to the situation.
Yeah.
Because you know, the purpose of the news is to inform people. One of its purposes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not meant to scare them. It's meant to inform them, right, for the decisions they're going to make. And that's exactly what the Holy Spirit's saying. He says, don't deny the presence of that emotion. Use this emotion to educate yourself to the truth of who you are.
Right.
So then I'm not in denial of anything.
Right.
I'm accepting that. Like you said, we got to look at it.
And then give it to the Holy Spirit.
So he can translate it.
Yes.
Because just getting in touch with emotions brings us backwards.
Right. If I just got in touch with my fear, and this is kind of the, the psychoanalytic idea. Let's just get in touch with the fear and the badness and the whole story that's causing you to feel this way and to think this way. And then it just goes on. I know somebody who's in therapy every week for 26 years. Really? Is that therapeutic? So it's like, if we just look at the fear and the bad things that we think have happened to us, and we just let it be as, oh, well, that's the way it is, then we're stuck there. It's like, Freud's most famous book, I think his most famous book, was Civilization and Its Discontents. And he was basically saying the best you can do is to be a well-adjusted neurotic. And the Course is saying you can give up that neurosis when you realize it's not real. It's not based on who you are and where you belong. You belong in the mind of God. You belong in the heart of God.
That's where he says at the end of the pamphlet for psychotherapy, we don't need long-winded, wearying discussion about what's going on here.
Right.
It's very simple. Something has come up that's making you feel like you can deny the presence of love.
Right.
That's all that's going on. And if you really turn that over to the wisdom inside of you, to the truth of yourself, you will have an experience of love instead of denying.
Yes.
And so what the Course is saying, so in other words, instead of us wrangling about what's really the cause of how we got to this horrible situation, we can own the cause of what's going on because the cause is nothing.
Yes.
When we look at it and we give it to the Holy Spirit, we can see that we're really afraid of nothing, that we're full, we're abundant. We have everything we need.
We're just trying to avoid love, actually. It's the tiny mad idea. Yeah. So I want to get back to that idea of the power of decision. Right? So if we're in fear, and it could happen. It can happen that we're in fear for a long time. I mean, as I'm saying this, I actually feel the memory of it in my body. I mean, we all know what fear feels like. We can recognize, first of all, that we're doing it to ourselves. So paragraph 3 says, what is the reason for not saying, get out of here, madman, get out of here, fear, get out of here, ego? What's the reason for saying this? What could be the reason except that you had asked the ego to come in? We have asked it to come in, and we can say, get out. And taking the power of our decision seriously. This is the Course says this is the only part of free will we still have. Otherwise, we're in the ego. So remember how it talks about hostage?
Host or hostage.
Host or hostage. Okay. And so we think we can be host to the ego. Oh, I can have a little ego, but really I'm still me. And it's saying, here it's saying, as soon as you let the ego in, it takes over and it kicks your awareness of your true self out of your mind.
You know, one of the best descriptions of that particular state of mind in the Course for me is where he says, you're like a child who's too tired to know what they want, like a cranky little baby, no matter what, you're just, it just needs to go to sleep.
Yeah, right.
Needs, right. But that's kind of the place we get. It's all sort of a blur. Yeah. And we can't really see our way forward. And if we don't know, is it this, is that? It's like there's no clarity in that. Yeah. And that's where he's saying, you know, you're on the Holy Spirit's track because you'll feel very clear. You'll be very clear about your purpose. You'll be very clear about the means to achieve it. Yeah. And so he's giving us all these little descriptions of here's the ego state of mind. Here's the Holy Spirit's state of mind. If you're conscious, you will choose the Holy Spirit.
Right. And we also think that there's value in the ego. I mean, the world will tell you over and over and over, be afraid, be very afraid. That's your protection. That's why it's so important to do these lessons as they're written, like every hour. Did you want to talk about that, about the practice?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that without breaking the continuity of the content in this lesson was way back in, or not way back, but in my defenselessness, my safety lie, he laid out the practice instructions of spend as much time as you can. It's right. You know, the more time you put in, the more you're going to learn. And then the other practice instructions was to develop the habit to stop every hour and give thanks for all the loving guidance you got the hour before, right. Yeah. And then open up to all the loving guidance that you're going to have in the hour that comes. So you reset the clock.
Reset every hour.
Yeah, reset it.
If we can do that for 1 minute every hour, it will transform our day. So today, just as an example, just as a practice, you can take this lesson and put it in your own words. Let's just remind ourselves of that. Early on in the workbook, he talks about related thoughts, and he gives us a whole review in which he says, this is the lesson title. And here are some other ways that you might use it. And they don't even seem to be that closely related. So what it means, so I think that was like lesson, what?
Power of Decision?
No, that was like lesson 80. That was the second review anyway. If you wanted to go back and look at that. So you could say something like, as a way of restating this lesson for yourself every hour, this is how I'm going to do it probably. I choose to remember that I'm in the mind of God. Fear does not belong in my mind. Pain does not belong in my mind. Upset does not belong in my mind. I belong in the mind and heart of God. You know, those are ways that I might choose to restate the lesson in words that really resonate with me. And you can choose your own, but try to do it once an hour. Even set your, your clock, right? Your phone.
You know, part of that is that when we can put it into our own words, when we can see this is coming from my thoughts, this is my thought system now, we'll have greater dedication to it.
Yes.
And a greater appreciation of it, because as long as it remains something that's coming from someplace else, then we'll have faith in that, we'll do it. But when we begin to see, this is my way out.
Yeah.
Right? This is the path I'm taking. Right. We have ownership from it. Then our dedication is not to something other than ourselves,
Right.
but dedication to the identity of who we are.
Yeah. And that dedication, if you can remember that, that calls up your power of decision.
Yeah.
Because when we're thinking with the ego, the words that are used are constant. They're about prison, being imprisoned in chains. In this lesson, I think it says slavery. But words like that are evocative of what the ego does to our mind,
Yeah.
our thinking, when we entertain it. When we let the ego in, it says, you're weak. Listen to me. I'll save you.
Yeah.
And we're not weak. The power of decision is the power to get out of the physical identity and into spirit identity.
So the fear is there because what he's saying is things become real to you when you value them.
Yeah.
And if you no longer value them in that certain way, then you'll just let go of them.
Right.
I mean, I love that idea about the Course when he's saying, if you bring all this up to present consciousness, if you just bring it up into your awareness in a present moment, you will choose the sane alternative.
Right.
You won't choose to remain in a blur and confused about what's going on. I mean, that's the worst.
Yeah.
And especially if you feel like your channel to God is somehow blocked at that moment. That's just hopelessness.
That's ego story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love it when he's saying, just bring this up into your awareness, bring it into that kind of clarity, and you will choose peace.
Yeah.
Instead of conflict, because you don't want conflict. You don't really want to be in conflict. So rather than thinking fear is keeping me safe, I see it's fear itself that's making me feel endangered, and I can change that emotion to a call for love.
Yeah, and just one last thing before we open it up for comments, is that in the last part of this lesson, it's saying that Christ, let me just read one line. Today we offer thanks that Christ has come to search the world for what belongs to him. Later on, he defines Christ as the one self we all share.
Yeah.
So this little being here, can't be completely lost in ego, because the Christ that exists beyond this little self, the one self we share, is still calling to me. So then it says, look for your brothers. This is the way I interpreted it.
Yeah.
Look for the Christ in your brothers, and that will help you to remember that you are still the one self
Very good.
at home in God.
That's it. That's good, honey.